This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5 Watt World, where interested in help you get the most music from the least gear. Well, you asked for it. When I said, if you all love this video, I'll come back and make one covering the next 20 years of guitars and tones of Keith Richards. Let me know you need that in the comments. You resoundingly said, yes, we need that. Along with the release of the new Stones album, seems like it needs to be done now. The first video outlines Keith Richards' guitars from childhood until 1971, when he began using the Blackguard Telecaster that Eric Clapton gave him for his 28th birthday. That guitar would later be nicknamed Macabre, the guitar that would be strung without its low E string and put in open G tuning from here to the end of the world. But that's where the story starts. So if you want to know more about the guitars that Keith has used from 71 on, then stay tuned, because this is the 5 Watt World short history of the guitars of Keith Richards, the 70s and beyond. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe or grab a t-shirt, hoodie, hat, or a Stomp preset pack to support what we do. And become a bigger part of 5 Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5 Watt on Patreon. There's a friend level to suit any budget. The links are in the description. We pick up our story in that year, 1971, and carry it as far into the present day as is possible with a guitar collector of the magnitude of Mr. Richards. In April of '71, the Stones announced the creation of Rolling Stone Records, distributed by Atlantic Records worldwide. The contract guaranteed 6 new records over the next 4 years, including the already recorded Sticky Fingers, which would be released on April 23rd. The recording sessions for that album included Macabre, the '54 Blackguard Telecaster that capped off the previous video, and the new Rickenbacker that had been highly customized by Ted Newman Jones III, who was once described as a crazed Arkansas cowboy guitar genius, and who would become Keith's guitar tech. Recording new tunes was a constant at the recording studio in the basement of Keith's house, Nelcote, there in the south of France. 2 robberies at the house while the boys were sleeping gutted much of Keith's recording guitar collection, and other run-ins with the locals made staying in the south of France uncomfortable. So Keith and company adjourned to Sunset Sound in LA to finish the tracks for Exile on Main Street. In the wake of the theft, back in France, Keith reached out to Ted Jones again and asked him to come to LA to help replace the guitars and to set them up for him for the tours. In that run, they bought a 50s Telecaster with a sunburst finish and a maple neck, a '53 Blackguard Tele, a late '50s 3-pickup Les Paul Custom, and a Les Paul Custom with the classic P90s in the bridge and the staple-style P90 in the neck. The Les Paul Custom history is outlined in this video, but in brief, the elegant guitar was issued in '54 as Les Paul's idea of a black tie guitar. All black with gold hardware, it had a carved all-mahogany top on a mahogany body and a mahogany neck with an ebony fingerboard fitted with very low and flat frets. The Gibson catalog said that players praised the frets and dubbed the guitar the fretless wonder, but in fact, impressions of this setup spec'd by Les were mixed at best. The Custom was built with P90 complement from '54 to '57 when Gibson switched to their humbucking PAF, patent applied for, pickups, and moved it to 3 PAFs. If 2's good, 3's better, right? Must be custom. Also while in LA, Keith added another new guitar to his collection, a '50s burst Les Paul that was similar to the Sunburst Yaya's guitar, but with a more distinctive flame top. The nickel covers were still on the pickups on the guitar, but the original tuners had been changed to a set of chrome shalers. Keith played the guitars through an Ampeg combo amp on the sessions. As they planned for their 7th North American tour, Keith called Ted Newman Jones again to ask him to come along as his guitar tech. Keith said, "I used a lot of old blues tunings all the time. I've been into that since I first used them on the Beggar's Banquet album. When I use them on stage, I have to have no less than 5 different guitars, all with different tunings, and I'm always forgetting which one is which." This is interesting for a few reasons. As I mentioned before, this might be the first example of a band using a full-time guitar tech on the road. It also explains a really early reason for swapping guitars on stage between songs, something that's almost become part of the show now. And it's the segue to Keith buying and carrying a number of additional guitars. As always, some of these guitars were shared among the band on different tunes. Some of the guitars on that tour had recently been bought, and others we'd have seen before this. The late '50s 3-pickup Les Paul Custom, the early '50s Les Paul Custom, Macabre, and another Blackguard Tele from '53, a '50s Sunburst Tele, and an early '50s Gold Top where the finish had been removed. a 59 Stratocaster, and a Dakota Red Bronco, of all things. The 59 Strat would go on to be one of Keith's favorite guitars, and he used it heavily on that tour, and would continue to do so for many years to come. There were two customized acoustic guitars on the tour as well. One was a Gibson Dreadnought with a Hummingbird-style pickguard and an abalone-bound body and neck with dot inlays. The other was a Martin D45, the top-of-the-line Martin Dreadnought guitar. The D45 was the fanciest Dreadnought that Martin ever built and had been added back to the catalog in 1968. Years later, Keith would remember, "That's another one someone walked off with." It would be during this first part of the tour that Jones would replace the neck pickup on Macabre with a Gibson PAF humbucker. The nickname Macabre wouldn't come along until the 80s, so at this time he simply referred to it as his 54 Telecaster. Macabre can easily be recognized in pics from the small but clear gouge in the upper bout. The 53 Blackguard that was also used on the tour would later be dubbed Malcolm. Like Macabre, Malcolm was fitted with a set of modern Sperzel locking tuners, and the bridge was swapped out to a heavy saddle version and set up as a 5-string guitar, much like Macabre. The original finish had been sanded off before Keith got the guitar, so it's often referred to as the natural finish Telecaster, though now it's aged to a butterscotch as well. During this tour, Keith added a Rolling Stones tongue logo sticker to the top. These two Telecasters are likely the ones most associated with Richards. After that tour, Mick and Keith met up in Switzerland and began writing the next album, what would become Goat's Head Soup. They then went on to Jamaica to record the new material. The complemented guitars from the tour were used on the record, but the first of Keith's Les Paul Jr.'s was added to his collection, a 1960 double cutaway in wine red. This Junior was used heavily on the record and would be one of Keith's favorite guitars, particularly in the early 70s. In 73, the Stones put on a benefit concert for victims of the recent earthquake in Nicaragua. Mick's wife Bianca was from Nicaragua, and they'd flown down there to see that her mother was all right. In addition to the guitars mentioned from the recent tour and recording, there was also a Martin 00 28. On the tour that followed, Keith also used a white SG Custom, playing in particular Midnight Rambler, which is in standard tuning capoed at the 7th fret. Keith was also using a 5-string custom guitar that Ted Newman Jones had built for him. The guitar is a unique shape and has a P90 in the neck and a gold PAF humbucker in the bridge position. The guitar was built to be played in open G tuning and strung with 5 strings. As the year came to a close, it found the band working on the tracks for It's Only Rock and Roll. Along with that group of Les Paul Customs, the new Junior and the old Tellys, there was also a Walnut ES 355 TD-SV. Walnut ES guitars began being built in the late 60s, but by the early 70s they were in the catalog. Some have guessed that the walnut finish was a response to the popularity of the Gretsch Country Gentleman that was so visibly being used in the late 60s by George Harrison and the Beatles. By 73, it was the most popular color, outselling the wine red and the sunburst. So this ES 355 was likely a contemporary guitar at the time. As 74 dawned, Mick Taylor phased out of the group and Ron Wood became more present until joining the band after the group Faces ended. Wood had begun using custom Zemaitis guitars during his time with Faces. He showed up for the Stones with his second custom Zemaitis, a disc front model with 3 humbucking pickups that Wood would later keep in open E tuning for playing slide. Antanas Casimir Zemaitis was born in London, and after apprenticing as a cabinet maker, he began building custom guitars as well around 1950. By 1960, he was an accomplished 12-string guitarist in his own right, and as the 12-string acoustics were rare in England, his guitars were in high demand. By 65, he was building guitars full-time, and by 70, his client list included Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, George Harrison, and Greg Lake. Wood's first custom Zemaitis had a fully engraved metal front on the single cutaway style guitar. The metal front of the guitar was supposed to help with electrical interference. Had a single cutaway mahogany body and neck, similar to a Les Paul Special, but with a 25-inch scale length. Zemaitis had teamed up with his friend Danny O'Brien, a master gun engraver. Zemaitis handcrafted his own metal bridges, tailpieces, truss rod covers, front plates, etc. Effectively all the metal parts, and then he turned them over to O'Brien to engrave each part, personalized to the specific client. That second disc front model shared the same wood construction and 25-inch scale length, but it had 3 humbucking pickups, with 3 volume and 3 tone knobs, a 5-way switch, and a built-in preamp powered by a 9-volt battery. It also led to the pearl front guitar. Instead of a metal front, it had a mosaic of pearl and abalone pieces. Woods received one of the first pearl guitars, which was fitted with 3 single-coil pickups. Prepping for the next tour of North and South America, a number of new instruments would have to be added. A custom 70's 5-string guitar was gifted to Keith by Ron Wood. The Pirate, or Macabre guitar, had the standard mahogany body and neck, a bound ebony fingerboard with engraved dragon on the headstock, and a skull and dagger inlaid on the top. There were 2 tuners on the bass side and 3 on the treble side of the headstock. There was 1 pickup and a single volume and tone control. The 5-string bridge and tailpiece were custom made by 70's. Tuned in open G, it was one of Keith's favorite guitars until it was destroyed in a house fire in Los Angeles in 1978. He'd later be given a Japanese-produced replica of the guitar during the Big Bang tour in 2006. The 70's brand is now owned by Japanese instrument maker Kanda Shokai. Near the end of his time with Faces, Wood also acquired a 55 hardtail Stratocaster. Fender released the Stratocaster in '54, featuring the synchronized tremolo. They even listed that in the headstock decal. The hardtail version of the guitar didn't appear until March of '55, so Wood's guitar was actually from the first year they were built. Interestingly, though it is a hardtail, the headstock was still the standard decal, espousing the tremolo feature. This guitar would end up being one of his main recording and touring guitars with the Stones. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. I'm currently having fun going through Jeff McErlane's Solo Electric Blues course. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35 in the description. Or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up now to start your journey to being a better guitarist. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. Before the tour, Keith also acquired 3 Traverse Bean, a 6-string, a standard 4-string, and a TB2000. Bean guitars were known for their unique aluminum necks. The entire backline of the tour would be Ampeg SVT amps painted white with floral grill cloths. Immediately following that tour, Keith acquired an important guitar in his history, the 1975 Fender Telecaster Custom. Fender had introduced the Tele Custom in '72 in an attempt to compete with Gibson's 2 humbucking Les Paul. The unique wide-range humbucking pickups were actually designed by Seth Lover, who Fender had lured away from Gibson, where Lover had designed the original PAF pickups in the late '50s. With 2 volume and 2 tone controls and a 3-way toggle on the upper bass spout, the layout would be familiar to anyone used to playing a Les Paul. But in every other way, it was a straight-up '70's Telecaster with a slab body and a maple neck and a maple fingerboard. It would become one of Richard's main guitars during the very next tour and for many years beyond. When in Chicago on the tour, in July, Keith and Ronnie made a special trip to the Gibson factory in Kalamazoo. There were pictures of the visit with them looking at different guitars, and in the end they left with a new blonde L6S and an S1 Marauder guitar, along with a new J200 acoustic. The L6S was introduced in '73 and was an all-maple guitar designed by Bill Lawrence. Shaped a bit like an oversized Les Paul, with a 24 3/4-inch scale and a 24-fret fingerboard. The S1, on the other hand, had a body like a Les Paul Special, but with a pointed headstock like you'd see on a Flying V. The 24 3/4-inch scale neck was bolted to the body and had a rosewood fingerboard. The 3 single-coil electronics were designed by Bill Lawrence and could be switched to sound much like a humbucking pickup. That highly successful tour of the Americas ended in August. The Stones had played to over 1 million people at the 45 shows during the 69-day tour. After the tour, Mick and Keith went to work on the Black and Blue album, first in Switzerland and then in New York. '77 saw the tour include a gig at a club in Toronto called the El Macambo. Keith remembered, "In a place like the El Macambo, you can hear the band, and more importantly, we can hear the band." The small venue had them rethinking their gear, and they added a set of Mesa Boogie amplifiers. The pair of Mark I's were built when Boogies were still being built at Randall Smith's house. It was basically him, his wife, and a couple of neighbors building the amps. They were small combos, but were running at 100 watts. Keith and Ronnie also began using MXR effects on that tour. Some Girls came out in the middle of June. On the following tour, Keith sometimes could be seen playing Ronnie's 56 single cut along with the Newman Jones Tele. It was during this tour that there was the fire at Keith's rented house in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles. The Zemaitis Macabre, Newman Custom No. 1, and Martin Acoustic that Newman had converted to a 5-string were all lost. In the end, Some Girls, Emotional Rescue, and Tattoo You were all written across the same time period, so much of the gear overlapped as well. On the spring of '79 New Barbarians tour, Keith showed up with 5 new guitars. The first was a new 5-string Ted Newman Jones guitar. By this point, Jones had settled into Keith Richards' model, with a single cutaway, 1 5/8-inch thick Paduch body, and a bird's eye maple top, a 24-fret Paduch neck, and a maple fingerboard. The guitar featured 2 black EMG active pickups and a custom 5-string saddle. Jones had hoped to put the guitar into production, building as many as 100 a year, but this clearly never happened, as there are very few that have ever surfaced. The second guitar was a '57 Sunburst single-cut Les Paul Jr. with the classic single dog-eared P90 pickup and wrap tailpiece. He also added a natural finish Telecaster Deluxe, similar to his Black Deluxe. There was a double-cut Travis Bean guitar with a 5-string headstock. And finally, a '58 double-cut Les Paul TV Jr., very much like the Wine Red Jr., but in this case in TV yellow, with a tortoise pickguard. The factory bridge had been swapped out to a Leo Kwan Badass bridge, and the tuners replaced with a set of chrome Grovers. Keith's Juniors were seeing very heavy use in the studio and on tour during this entire period. Keith had a Sunburst 67 Tele that can be seen in the promotional videos for Start Me Up. In those pics, it has the original bridge and neck pickup, with an additional humbucker added by the bridge. But by the '81 tour, the guitar was converted to a 5-string spec with an open black bobbin PAF humbucker neck pickup, switched to a black pickguard, added locking tuners, and Spertzel brass bridge with 1 saddle removed. The guitar was nicknamed Sonny, after the great jazz saxophonist Sonny Rollins. Sonny would take its place, along with Macabre and Malcolm, as one of Keith's main Telecasters. Also on tour was a modified Wine Red Double Cut Jr. The original P90 had been replaced with a pair of double cream bobbin humbuckers. The bridge was also changed to a Leo Kwan Badass wraparound adjustable bridge, and the tuners were swapped out to a set of chrome Shalers. Ted Newman Jones was focusing on his guitar building, so a new tech, who had worked with Pete Townsend of The Who, was brought on, Alan Rogan. That Jr. was bought by Rogan in that state while they were out on tour. The Telecaster that Jones had put together with a Fender rosewood neck now got a rosewood replacement body from Schecter that Rogan put together along with a set of Seymour Duncan pickups. It was a heavy beast, but Richards loved the sound. Around this time, Ron Wood bought a classic 1958 Mary Kay Stratocaster. The Ashbody Strat had the very rare see-through whitewash blonde finish on all-gold hardware. The finish got its nickname after it was used by Las Vegas lounge singer and guitarist Mary Kay. Keith ended up falling in love with the guitar and used it during the Dirty Work sessions, and eventually Wood would give the guitar to Keith. After his experience with Zemaitis and Newman Jones custom guitars, Keith was open to handmade one-off guitars. He bought a number of custom guitars from Doug Young and Joseph Giselli. On the opposite end of the spectrum, both Keith and Ronnie began using Japanese-made ESP guitars. The connection was made by guitar tech Alan Rogan, who knew some of the guys at ESP. ESP, or Electric Sound Products, started in 1975 in Tokyo as a shop providing high-quality guitar replacement parts, and they built guitars for the Japanese market under the names ESP and Navigator. In '83, they opened a shop in New York City, offering their parts and custom-built guitars under the ESP name. Ron Wood eventually would have a Strat-shaped and Tele-shaped signature models, and Keith liked the Tele-style guitars for their ability to stay in tune. During the Dirty Work sessions, Richards used a '59 blonde Telecaster that he'd bought through collector and producer Perry Margolef. Keith needed a guitar for a photo shoot for Guitar World magazine, and Margolef brought the guitar over for him to hold. It was stock except for the heavy 6-saddle bridge having been added, and Keith bought the guitar on the spot. The acoustics on that session included a '67 Martin D18 and a Martin 0021, which was set up in Nashville tuning. To set up a Nashville tune guitar, you use the high strings of a 12-string set for the E, A, D, and G string, and use the regular strings for the B and E. This gives you a lot of the ringing sound of a 12-string and is often used for doubling parts. As the '80s wore on, solo projects and disagreements had the Stones out of touch with each other for long stretches of time. Keith continued to acquire guitars, including a pair of Music Man Silhouettes, a black model with single-coil EMGs, and a white model with EMG humbuckers. Richards really liked the feel of the guitars, saying that they were nice and compact, and that they had a classic feel like a Strat, Tele, or a Les Paul. His guitar tech, Alan Rogan, said, "Keith's got a lot of guitars. Most of them haven't been played in a long time. I don't think he's got any idea how many he's really got." In '87, Gibson built Keith a custom L5S. With a maple neck and an ebony fingerboard, its most striking feature was that it had a single bridge position humbucking pickup. Richard set it up as a 5-string guitar. '89 would see Keith using a Roger Sadowski solid body nylon string guitar in the studio and on stage. They had a quilted maple top over a mahogany body, with a Larry Fishman transducer built into the bridge under the saddle, and a custom preamp built by Alex Aguilar. Also around '95, Keith purchased and began using a '59 Gibson ES355 with a factory original Bigsby. He used it on the Voodoo Lounge sessions and on stage as one of his favorite standard tuning guitars. This guitar was followed by a '64 black ES355, also with a factory Bigsby, as a backup to the red guitar. A '64 factory white 345, nicknamed Dwight, would follow later on. And with these three, he seemed to circle back to his love of the Walnut 355 from years before. He used these new guitars often. Something of a new style of guitar seemed to come into Richard's life rather late to the party, but Keith, as we've seen, has always been open to something fresh and new to him over the years, and always to our benefit. First, I need to thank Jason Laughlin. Composing, playing, and producing the track used in the intro and outro of the video. Jason's well-versed in all of the great Telecaster players, and his years as a session guitarist being asked, "Can you play something a little bit like Keith Richards?" worked out for us here. The book, Rolling Stones Gear, by Andy Babiuk and Greg Prevost, made this video possible. Any fan of the Rolling Stones can find all their questions answered in this massive and remarkable volume. If you haven't already watched it, check out the first half of Keith's guitar life in my video, The Guitars of Keith Richards, the 60s. I want to thank everyone that stopped by the store and picked up a hoodie, a hat, a t-shirt, or the Stomp preset pack. And in particular, I need to thank my friends at 5-Watt on Patreon. It's the guitar community I've always wanted. You're all 5-Watt world. I just make the videos. Thanks for hanging with me until the end. Until next time, this is Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5-Watt world.